You're listening to From the Chair, and I'm your host, Mike Hamilton. Join us each episode as we talk to athletic directors from across America. We're going to talk about topics like leadership, career development, issues of the day, and I can promise you we're going to have some fun along the way too. So sit back, listen in, and let's dive in. Let's go. All right, welcome into today's episode. This is an exciting episode. Today actually marks episode 1 of season 2. We have now completed 50 episodes in season 1, and you can find all of those wherever you listen to your podcast or on YouTube if you're interested in the video format. And as we start season 2, we're going to have a few twists and turns. And one of those today is a very special guest, and that's Patti Phillips, who is the CEO of Women Leaders in College Sports. Patti, thank you for joining me.
Mike, thrilled to be here. I love that I'm one of your twists and turns. Starting off, by the way, congratulations on season 1. They were fantastic. I'm an avid listener, so really, really happy to be here.
Well, we're trying to tell the story around college athletics, the leadership story, and who the people are that are in the chairs, and humanize the position, and also candidly sort of peel back some of the contemporaneous issues and talk about how that's affecting the day-to-day work on college campuses. And certainly you personally and your organization collectively have played a big role in this concept of leadership development and advocacy for women in leadership roles. And I think that'll make for an interesting conversation today. I want to start talking about you initially, and then we're going to evolve into more conversation about the organization. And I know you started your career, if I'm correct, as a coach, volleyball and basketball coach, and then evolved into doing some commentary on color analysis, and then took a role with another organization in leadership development there in the Kansas City area. Talk to me a little bit about sort of your early career and the decision to evolve from the coaching aspect into taking another step and pouring into leadership development for women.
Yeah, I think my desire growing up, I just always wanted to be a coach. I mean, I loved sports. I had great coaches growing up, and actually until I was in college, they were all men. But I just loved the notion of sports and team and all that. So that was very impactful in how I think I evolved and grew as a leader. And my dream when I graduated college was to be a high school English teacher and basketball coach. I was an English major, and I actually got the opportunity to coach at the collegiate level right out of college. I was 22 years old. The athletic director at that school had been the men's basketball coach at my high school. So I tell the story. The universe is about not who knows you, or not who you know, but who knows you. Right. So he knew who I was. He knew my work ethic. He knew my energy. And still, it says a lot. And it's interesting, Mike, we're doing this in the 50th anniversary of Title IX. It just says a lot about that program at the time. I was honored to be hired at 22, but I don't think that would happen for a men's program. And, so I took advantage of that opportunity, though. And I got my master's at the time, but I coached volleyball and basketball, had never played a day of volleyball in my life. Actually turned the volleyball program around before the basketball, though. I went and did took some great coaching, some clinics, and really became skilled at teaching, not playing volleyball, but teaching. And that was a really impactful part of my growth as a leader, was learning how to coach and lead at a really young age, younger than most, I would say. And I loved every minute of it. And I say to this day that I lead as a coach. I am still a coach at heart. So it's a very impactful time for me, but I believe in the growth and development of people. So I think that really evolved into all these other roles that I've been fortunate to have.
So that was it. Is that at Ottawa? Is that where that first?
Yes, Ottawa University, but in Ottawa, Kansas.
Yeah. Yeah. So now, you may know this or may not, but now I know two folks who have had a history at Ottawa, you and Mitch Barnhart, who's the AD at Kentucky.
Oh, yes.
That's actually his alma mater. So
yeah.
Pretty interesting. And you mentioned the early start, and I may be slightly off this, but it's not much. When Pat Summitt was hired at Tennessee, she was hired basically right out of college as well, and was, I think, taking graduate classes as she was also coaching those first Lady Vol teams. So it's you take the opportunity when it comes your way. And certainly, there's been an evolution in how coaches are hired, but you along with Pat and others proved very early on you're more than capable of handling what came with that.
Well, I'm no Pat Summit, so I'm not even comfortable with this conversation of comparison. But yeah, no, I mean, a little bit different circumstances. But again, it was a small school. I was a third coach in 3 years, and there wasn't it was NAIA level actually, so it didn't have a lot of resources. But to your point, and I think this is a message for all young people. We all have our stories about volunteering for jobs or taking jobs. I think I was paid $10,000, was also the RD in the dorm, the SID. I had like 9 jobs, but it was coaching. And I thought, wow, what an amazing opportunity. And I do think as we talk about leadership and what our organization does in developing leaders, it's this message with this generation now. I think that piece is missing from young people. We had it in a different way. Like we would do anything to learn and grow on the job. And I think, listen, our young people now are super qualified and they are certainly working hard, but it was a different time. And I took the job for the experience and for the passion. It was certainly not about the brand at the time. It wasn't about the money, but it's an experience that really shaped and molded me. I'll tell you a great story. So I, was hired at 22. And when you are young and leading, whether you're teaching or whatever you're doing, you only have the information you have from where you came from, right? So it was my coaches in college. That was all the information I had. But the men's coach at the time, well, it was Steve Hill who hired me. He was also the athletic director. He had a great program, and I would go and watch his practices. I would sit, behind their bench and listen to how he communicated during timeouts. But the best part was I always wanted to learn, and I would ask him after games how he communicated in the locker room at, halftime if they were down. And he said, you know what? You can go through the visitor side and kind of sneak in and listen, through not going through the door. It was their locker room, and then there was a restroom, and then it was the visitors' women's locker room. So the men were on the other side, and I would listen in to how he framed stuff, and I would take notes, and I learned. When we talk about mentoring, for me, it was so much modeling. He was a model. He was a mentor and a model. And I learned, and he allowed me to be around him and listen to the language of leaders. I say that all the time. You want to be around leaders. That's how we learn. That's how I think you learn. You read books, you watch videos, but when you are in a space, seeing leaders do what they do, and that was the most invaluable experience as a young leader for me, a young coach really at the time.
Yeah, no doubt. So there's a common theme here, by the way, as I look at your progression through your career, and that is, you mentioned coaching already. Education is certainly a part of that, no doubt. And then leadership development and pouring into others' lives. And, the best coaches are those who not only understand the X's and O's of the game, but they're pouring into others' lives. And you were on the front end of the NCAA Champs LifeSkills program as the program coordinator, and we were talking off air. When Champs LifeSkills was rolled out as a program, it was seen as sort of glass shattering in its own way at the time, because it was beginning to take a holistic look at the student athlete process. And that sounds almost, you think about that now and you're like, of course,
Yeah.
that was what we needed to be doing. But at the time, it really was new ground. I'm curious, as you have, not only your time with the NCAA doing that work, but now your ability to be around programs and leaders. What have you seen as the evolution and maybe the outcomes of the NCAA launching that program now, however many years ago it was? I think it's been positive, right? And I could have my thoughts on what it's done to be additive, but as someone who's on the inside, I'm curious your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting when you mention that timeline. So I was at the NCAA from 97 to 99, if you can believe that. And I don't remember exactly how long Champs LifeSkills had been around, but it had been around for at least a couple of years. We were certainly at that time, we would have conventions. It was Champs LifeSkills conventions. And so I guess it was in the early goings of that. And you're right. Before that, I mean, I know the NCAA, we all know, was started around championships and eligibility. So that might have been some of the first energy around the broader picture. They also did they used to do the the student athlete leadership conferences. We had one huge one at Disney World. So the NCAA early on, certainly from a staff perspective, and that department at that time it was called Education and Leadership Development, and there was a focus on the student athlete experience outside of championships. So, Mike, to your point, I know that that's evolved over the years at the national office, and the name of that division has had several iterations over the years. And I do think I can't say whether or not campuses were that focused on that before that time. I think you and I would both agree. Since then, certainly. Campuses are certainly doubling down on the student athlete experience. Unfortunately, that doesn't always get out there. It hasn't been out there to the outside world and to the media, but we know how much campuses and athletic directors and staffs have been focused on the well-rounded, and that was the whole point of that program. What you are learning on the field as an athlete, how can you take those skills and be more intentional about your personal life in a broader sense. So I think the NCAA and campuses have been doing a great job on that for years and years, and honestly, not getting credit for it.
I agree with you. I think that, when we start having the narrative about what the university does for the student athlete, and certainly the student athlete does much for the institution, but when we start talking about what the institutions are doing for the student athletes, that's a piece of the puzzle that hasn't received enough publicity.
Right.
Anything from career planning to financial planning, certainly now mental health assistance, nutrition assistance, things that just didn't exist in the ecosystem 20, 25 years ago, that I believe are not only recruiting tools, as some of the coaches sort of encouraged early on, but they're very real and tangible and impactful, and they've made a difference in the quality of life of the student athletes, both while on campus and then following their time on campus.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, so mentors. I was going to actually go to mentors later in my conversation, but since you brought up the concept of mentoring in your commentary about Steve and his being a mentor for you, I do think that when I have the chance to speak to students in classes or to other folks that I meet in the industry that are younger or whatever, I think that the concept of having a mentor or mentors is probably one of the most valuable things a person can do. And I don't think that, by the way, if you're in a particular career track, I don't necessarily think that they have to any way, shape, or form be in your career track, right? You can be in college athletics, but some of my best mentors during my time in college athletics were business leaders and others in the community that my paths crossed with. So you are in the business of leadership development. You're every day working on trying to help women understand how to take the next step in their careers. Talk to me a little bit about, let's dive a little bit deeper on your belief and what you share with those that you're helping to lead about the concept of mentoring.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. I think it is invaluable. Most of the time it's free. I mean, it's this tool and resource that our industry does a really great job of talking about. I'm always surprised. We do a lot of work in companies and corporations and even in the pro space. And it's surprising, Mike, how much others don't talk about it. We, in our industry, we do. So I think that's great. We could look at definitions of mentors and all that. I believe that mentors help people feel seen and heard, number one. And specifically for women. And women, traditionally kind of go into these male-dominated roles and fields. And the bottom line is there's an imposter syndrome that has been well documented. There's confidence issues that are sometimes well documented. And it's because you're the only. And it's a little different. So the navigation is different. So having someone that sees you, that hears you, that listens to you, that encourages you is a very big deal for everyone. And so that's what early on in my career Steve did. It was okay for me to ask him questions about that play. It was okay for me to say, how did you manage this situation? So at someone, and then honestly, they become your champions and sponsors, right? But this notion of being seen and heard, I think, is invaluable. And then the other thing I mentioned earlier that I don't think people talk about as much is this modeling. So mentoring becomes modeling in many ways. And I think that's when it's a real value add. And listen, you don't have to have a mentor to model behaviors of great leaders that you are inspired by. And we take that for granted. You can watch those on videos. I can watch what Mike Hamilton's doing on his podcast, and I could do that on my podcast. And so this notion of people that are doing it really well, modeling those behaviors. And that's exactly what I do with Steve. And I've done that with so many other people, male and female, throughout my career. Some mentors, I believe, hopefully turn into champions and sponsors. Models don't have to. So they're a little bit different, and sometimes there's crossover. So Steve was actually a mentor, and he modeled behaviors for me that I was trying to learn as a young coach, who I was coaching people that were my age or older sometimes. So I think that those two words together, there's real power in. But I can't emphasize enough, and and you and I have talked about this, and you just mentioned it. It's an invaluable tool for growth and development for everybody, male and female, for sure.
So I'm going to go a little bit deeper. So
Yeah,
from a granular perspective, you talked about being seen, being heard, being a model. From a granular perspective, if someone comes to you and open-handed and says, "Would you consider mentoring me?" or whatever, what's the best way? And by the way, I'm going to flip this on its head in a minute and ask, what's the best way to be a mentee? Is that the
yeah.
right word? But as a mentor, practically speaking, what does a good mentor look like if someone comes and asks you to serve as their mentor? Now, part of it's going to be what they observe, as you've already alluded to,
Yeah,
right? But I'm talking
yeah,
about in terms in action. If you're asked to be someone's mentor, what does good mentoring look like?
yeah. So interesting. Well, first of all, we have a very robust mentorship program that we have huge success stories from. The NCAA has a great mentoring program, every organization out there. So there are mentor programs where you don't have to say, "Will you be my mentor?" but you're matched. And the people that are engaging in those programs, both sides know what the purpose is. So back to your point, there's got the purpose, I think, is really important when you are matched or kind of quasi asking someone. I personally, Mike, I mean, I've never said to someone, "Will you be my mentor?" I just don't think that's the way to do it personally. Now, that's
Yeah,
different than going through a program where there's a purpose. I never said to Steve, "Will you be my mentor?" Steve Hill. I never said to Ann St. Peter, who's another winner, Janet Justice. They just were. So it's a relationship that develops. And again, that doesn't mean that I wouldn't sign up for a CEO program. I want to be a CEO or whatever earlier in my career, and I would be matched. And so again, there's a purpose. So I am not a fan of people in the industry just emailing someone saying, "Would you be my mentor?" Because it's forced in a different way. I think you interact with people, you meet someone at an event, you are modeling what they're doing, you are fanned, and you find a way to connect. And I think there's got to be either an energy there, or you work with them, or you're matched. To me, that doesn't mean it doesn't work. Again, you asked
yeah,
for my opinion. I just think there's for it to really work, there's an alignment there. So to randomly say to someone, "Will you be my mentor?" doesn't mean it won't work. I just don't think that's the best way to do it. I think the relationship and energy piece is really important. And honestly, that's that back to how do you be a good mentee? Well, there's effort that's involved, and it's a give and take. And so Steve knew that I was engaged and wanting to learn and grow. And I was showing up early to his practices. I was asking, I was following through, and I was reporting back. And so I had a goal. I wanted to be better. I wanted to be a good coach. And honestly, I wasn't a good coach because I never coached before. So he saw that there was an effort there. So I think there's no one perfect way with everything we're going to talk about with leadership, with everything. There is no one right path. I think the key here is alignment with purpose. What is your goal? So when you are matched in these programs, whether it's executive level, I want to be an AD. So actually you're matched through our Executive Institute for our Pathways program, or for the NCAA Pathways, you're matched, and that's the goal. How do I get better at these executive level conversations? So I just think we need to be really careful.
yeah.
The other side, I do think people now are just like, "Oh, I want to ask someone to be my mentor, and they're gonna make sure I advance in my career." And that's actually not the intent. There's got to be skin in the game. There's got to be a true authenticity about the why. And I think that comes out when you get to know people, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, look, that is great content, by the way. And I wholeheartedly agree with you that the best mentoring relationships are those that effortlessly develop, in the sense that there's alignment of somebody may be very different from you stylistically, right? And you can ask for that person to be a mentor, and it just doesn't match. So it happens. It's organic, and so in the best
Right.
opportunities, it's organic, right? And then your point about having some effort if you're on the side of someone being mentored, you have to push in a little bit and ask questions to learn and observe. And I'll tell you this, as I'm sitting here reflecting on folks who I would say were mentors to me, and also likewise that I feel like I'm a mentor to, and those qualities you just have discussed are spot on. And the folks that I think would call me a mentor today, the kind of relationships that I have with them are very open.
Yeah.
They're easy. They're friendly. They know I care about them. They know when I ask them a question about something that I'm not asking because I'm trying to fill airtime. I'm
Right.
asking because I truly want what's best for them. And so that's really really good stuff. I appreciate your insight on that. So look, I'd say the last 20, I could make the extrapolation that your entire career has been about the things I've already said, leadership and education and coaching. But you've been very honed in on the leadership and empowerment efforts towards this narrative in the last 22 years in particular. First 10 years leading the Women's Intersport Network there in Kansas City, working with young women and women and girls on leadership development as a nonprofit organization, and then certainly in the last 12 years being the CEO of Women Leaders. Um, you were drawn to that. Part of it you've already alluded to as part of your desire to be a constant life coach,
Mhm.
constant coach. What else drew you to this specific endeavor? There's a common theme there, even beyond coaching, I would say.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I think part of it is, well, first of all, I'm really grateful that I've had the opportunity to be in these spaces that are really purpose and passion aligned for me for my entire career. And it's all been connected in sport, which for women is unusual. I mean, literally, my entire career has been in the business of sport, coaching or leading or some way in that. And I am so grateful and I feel truly blessed in that way. I think the other tie is I am obsessed with this notion of potential. I really am. I think that came from being an athlete and it came from being a coach. So our potential is unknown and unknowable. Of course, that's the definition of a growth mindset. We teach this in all of our leadership programs. And I think it's a key to actually being a great leader. And the other side of it is, it's this notion of why are we here on this planet? My goal is to have an impact, and it happens to be specifically to women and leadership. But that goes back to, so I always say, the bigger sphere is about potential. So women advancing into these leadership roles or being in the roles that they want to be in, that is about their potential. So how can I help in that way, or how can we help in that way? I think that owning your potential is an ownership issue. And I think that's the other thing that comes from being an athlete and a coach. You can't kind of put blame on anybody else. Like, with hard work, with intention, you can actually be or do almost anything. And we've kind of lost those conversations. Remember back in the day, they used to say with 10,000 hours of, on anything, or you read a chapter of a book, every night, and you can become an expert. Now that's like with all the things on the internet, it's
Right.
like almost a nanosecond, but we don't take the effort to do it. So the other thing that we talk about in our programs is the content's out there, the concepts are out there. The thing is action. And that's what people don't do today because we're so busy and there's so many things, pulling on our attention. So for me, it's this focus on what is the possibility for me as a human? Like, what's my potential? What's the possibility for us as an organization to have impact on others? Because that is about their potential. So I am fascinated by those possibilities. So I think that's been my driving force, Mike. I'm really thankful that I've been able to kind of be in spaces. And I think it goes back to the first job that I got that was really kind of bigger than what I thought I was qualified for at the time, I got. So then what are you going to do with that? So I was forced to like try to be a quick learner and become better and better and better. And that's just kind of been the theme for me.
Yeah. So if you look at the landscape in college athletics, specifically in today's world, you see tremendous women leaders across the board in so many different varieties of jobs, and certainly the women who are leading in the athletic director roles is growing, and they're having success. And but I want to talk to you just a moment about your observations on the hurdles that you help women overcome: unconscious bias in the marketplace and the hiring practices, opportunity in the marketplace, imposter syndrome. You mentioned that a moment ago. What are you
Yeah.
doing? What's the organization doing specifically? And maybe the others, by the way, that you will want to talk about here to help um, bridge the gap and lead women as they pursue these roles.
Yeah. Well, that's a very loaded question. There's several things to get out. So first on unconscious bias. I mean, it's well documented. I mean, it's real. And I
Yeah,
think it's very real in the sport industry, particularly college sports, around women as leaders. And we're working to overcome that. It's, um, what we have 6 women in the Power Five right now leading. They're all phenomenal, but 6 out of 65. Our numbers are going up slowly. You know, we're doing a lot behind the scenes there, technically, but on the unconscious bias piece, football is a big piece of that. And listen, we all love football, but what happens is this is an unconscious bias that women cannot lead programs that have big football programs. Well, Sandy Barber's proved that wrong. Jen Cohen, both been in the New York Six Bowls. You know, so but is that anyone's fault? No, necessarily. But is it unconscious? Yes. So like former donors, former football players, there's this energy around, oh God, can a woman run that program? And so we've struggled for years, Mike, with like, how actually do we combat that? So we first started with the leaders in the industry, making sure we're engaging men and women. You're a leader, guys that are athletic directors are leaders. How do we engage those? And they've been phenomenal. We have all sorts of champions out there that are helping with the messaging, that are saying, actually, no, women can do this. Then we went to search firms to find out, what are they seeing and hearing in the search process? And Mike, we took ownership of part of that. I wanted to hear, what are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? We can't always say it's out there. So this is kind of past the unconscious bias thing, but there are biases in the search process, not necessarily from search firms, but from search committees. There's unconscious bias from college presidents. By the way, there's fewer female college presidents than there are athletic directors. So this bias of leadership, it's a cultural thing that is beyond sports, but in our industry of college sports, it's a much more focused deal, particularly as it relates to our industry that is driven by football and media rights. It is driven by that. You know that better than anyone with working at Learfield. So getting the information from search firms, what can we control, what can't we control? So what else are we doing in searches? What are the trends in hiring? What are they looking for outside? What are they looking for in leaders? Understanding media rights, coming from development has been a big thing. That's shifting a little bit now. And then getting to the actual hirers. We've engaged presidents and chancellors now in our programming. I ask them all the time, why'd you make that hire, male or female? And by the way, Travis Goff right down the road at KU, he's the best guy ever. I love Travis. I certainly talked to Chancellor Girard about, tell me more about that process. What did you see in Travis during that process? So, we're just trying to get information all the time and figure out, what can we control? What are messages we can give to women? What can women control? And what are the ones we can't control? There's so many times the ones we can't control, those are schools that I won't name names, where people say, no, I'm not even going to get in that search. They would never hire a woman. You've heard that, Mike. I've heard it. And that is like a sucker punch. Don't you hate to hear that? Where it's 2022,
yeah,
for crying out loud. It's the 50th year of Title IX, and that's still a real thing. And actually, there are places that would never hire a woman. You know who they are. I know who they are. So That's an unconscious bias thing. Those is where, and I think we overcome it by getting the Heathers, the Ninas, the Candaces, the Jen Cohens, all those that are at that level, Carla Williams, that are successful, the Sandy Barber that just retired, and we have to show success, unfortunately, and they have much more of a burden to show that, so that more women will get those opportunities at all levels. And listen, that's the Power Five. We have women leading at all levels, and they are crushing it, obviously. But those, the Power Five level is the most visible, and that's what everyone's talking about, and that's the real marker. I think that's where we see that unconscious bias more so at that level than we are at the other levels. So what we do, Mike, back to the other part of your question, those things I listed, you don't change an unconscious bias overnight. These are cultural, systemic beliefs that are blind. And we can't get to everyone to help them understand that. So we got to figure out how you chip away. And it doesn't happen overnight, which is why 50 years later, we're still talking about some of these same issues. I do think we're making progress, though. I really do. And we're making progress because of great guys like you. Women can't, underrepresented communities cannot create change alone. And that is one thing from the beginning I know from being in the business of sport. Women can't get out there and change it for women alone. We actually need the guys involved. Minority groups, whether it's ethnic minorities, whatever, can't create change with just their group. They need the majority group. And so we've worked really hard as an organization to engage those influencers, the majority groups, those people in leadership to help us change. And they are. And it is happening. It's just happening slower than we would all like.
Yeah, that's great content as well as I expected. I would say this: I would challenge folks who are listening to this that are in leadership roles and have the ability to be advocates to do so. When I
Yeah.
remember one of the first Power Five jobs I interviewed for, which I ultimately did not get, the feedback was I was not a senior associate AD and I didn't have direct sports administration experience. And Doug Dickey, who was my AD at the time at Tennessee, when we were unpacking that, he said, I recognize in you leadership ability and every bit of ability to be an athletic director at the highest level. And so if that's holding you back, guess what? Now you're senior associate AD, and basketball and baseball now report to you, as well as these other units. He was an advocate for me. He gave me a chance, right? And so, like,
Yeah.
I think about, fortunate to have about a dozen folks who have worked with me who are now athletic directors. And I think of two females in particular. Desiree Reed Francois came from the West Coast and had largely worked
Yeah.
with a group of five schools, and we gave her the chance to be the first woman leading a men's basketball program as administrator in the Southeastern Conference. And then, Whip gave her more responsibility with
Yeah.
football and development, et cetera. And then Jackie Schumann, who was doing a great job in our Champs LifeSkills student life program, but she felt like she needed to have some external experience. And we saw in her a personality and a moxie and an ability to do things on the external side of the business too. So we gave her development responsibilities, and now she's the athletic director at UMass Boston. So it's you have to when you see folks who have the
Yes.
abilities, you need to take the risk, if you want to call it that, and let them lead, and give them the opportunities to shine and overcome some of the elements that you've just discussed, right?
Yeah, totally, Mike. And thank you for saying that. And of course, mentioning Desiree too, who I literally just got off a call with, who's phenomenal. She did a great job at UNLV and now Missouri. And so think back though, and I think of Desiree too. I love that you said you interviewed for I don't know how many jobs, but your first one for sure, they came back and said you didn't have quite the right skill set. So for women, they get that and that unconscious thing that's not said. So they don't have this, they don't have that, they're not doing this. And the thing that's not said is, yeah, we can't see a woman in this role. So that's the extra layer that women have to break through. And again, it's happening. But I appreciate that you said you challenging everyone out there so women, we have to have, like, we aren't going to get the jobs without do ever. So we got to have all that. And then we have to overcome that bias. So it's having the people like you had that said, actually, you can do it. It's bringing people in saying, you actually do need this skill set. So we're going to give you more responsibility. And then we do need guys that are in the room saying, I do believe that this woman can do this job. We actually have to have people saying that. And that's, because we get judged not only on those skill sets that the guys do, because not every guy doesn't get every job he wants either. We totally recognize that. So there's another layer, though, that women have to overcome, and it is being a woman and this kind of, this veil out there that women didn't play football, so they can't, they can't run a program, but there's no AD on the planet that's sending plays in to their head football coach. So that's not happening. So I want to make sure that's clear. But, and again, we've come a long way. We're getting there, Mike. And it's guys like you and others that are helping push these women forward that are really helpful.
Well, you're doing a great job. Your organization's doing a great job. And as we wrap up here, I want to give you a chance to talk just a little bit about, you've got a big upcoming convention in just a few weeks in Kansas City. Sorry, I'm not going to be able to be with you this go round, but we'll get there. And I think that your organization continues to grow. I think you've grown at multiple hundreds% growth over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And maybe just share with us a few moments about those who are maybe going to attend the convention, what they can expect this year, or perhaps if it's not too late and somebody wants to attend, how they might make sure that they're there.
Yeah. And Mike, you're getting a pass this year since you have a family vacation. That's the only reason I would let you slide, but I appreciate, I know we'll get you there next year. Yeah, no, it's not too late. It's October 9 through 11 in Kansas City, back in person after 2 years. We have an amazing lineup of heavy hitters in the industry. Our keynotes are always New York Times bestselling authors. One has written a book on communication strategy. So again, gender neutral messages. And we do have a lot of guys. All the cool guys come to our convention, by the way. We'll have about 1,000 people there. And so Vanessa Van Edwards speaking on its communication cues, but it's fascinating. She talks about how to really get your message across, and it's got to be a combination of competency, knowing what the hell you're talking about, and warmth. So this connection to people. So the way she packages it is phenomenal. We all need that. So our other keynote has a book out called Limitless. So, and then we give our awards, and we have, 2 leadership tracks, or a leadership kind of professional development track, and then an industry topic track. So it's a really special experience. It's different than all the other conventions out there. The energy of it, all are good in their own ways. Ours is certainly a set your soul on fire. So if you want that, it's not too late to register. Come to Kansas City, great sports city. And by the way, the Chiefs play the Raiders on that Monday night, so there's a lot of energy buzzing in Kansas City that weekend. But Mike, the other thing I'd like to mention really quick here before we close out is, the growth over the years, as you mentioned, has been super intentional with our brand and how we've changed, and we've listened to what's going on out there in the industry. We've undergone a name change. NACL was definitely a buzzkill, but it was important at the time. And I think we're all evolving and becoming the best version of ourselves individually and as an organization. And the name change better says who we are and what we do. Women leaders in college sports right now. We're doing a lot in the pro space, so that might change over time as well. But this notion of how do we serve our members, we do it in person, and the convention is one piece of that. And we do it virtually. We have this whole platform now where members engage on this community platform called Engage. We have it, on our website. We actually have an app now. So this network is the other piece of what we do that we believe is really important. And, I listen to your podcast as I'm an avid listener, but, your podcast with Jen, and I appreciate that she mentioned Jen Cohen, that she just was coming off D1 Next, which is another in-person event for women leaders. She said it's impactful because I know I'm not alone. There's all these different groups that we bring together. So this massive network of women is important. This in-person convention is one piece of that. And then we have virtual events as well, where we are kind of gathering these groups, whether it's moms in sports, women in, pro sports. It is, executive level circles. So the deputies and that types of group. And I do think there's real value in these kind of groups coming together to talk about their experiences. We talked about being seen and heard. not feeling alone. Those types of things are really important. But there's nothing that can replace the in-person experience. So we're super excited that our convention is the one like big gathering of everybody. Like I said, we're expecting about 1,000 folks. It's not too late. So you can go to our website and check it out. But we'd love to have everyone come visit us in Kansas City.
Final question on programming for the organization specifically. I know you don't have a large staff, but if a campus requests the ability for you to maybe do a one-off session with the women of their staff on a particular campus, are you able to do that?
Yeah, we do that quite a bit, sometimes virtually. Interestingly enough, we actually have a consulting arm called the Women Leaders Performance Institute. A huge part of what we talk about in our leadership development is performance. So performance habits, how you create high performance habits. And that has been interesting to organizations outside of college sports. We do a lot with the NFL. We work with the LPGA now. We do a lot with corporations. So we actually created another arm that's called the Women Leaders Performance Institute. Sometimes, Mike, those types of things are done out of that kind of group. It's still me, but we'll bring in other people sometimes, and we could do it virtually or in person. But yes, we do love to do that. Sometimes organizations or schools have us do it with all their staff, men and women. Sometimes it's just for the women. High performance habits, again, it's not a gender neutral conversation, right. But I do think we bring a different lens to the conversation. And there is a thing in athletic departments where women have a different experience, and it's okay. And what's now is like, okay, we're aware of that. Now what? So we certainly could bring tools that help everybody kind of move forward together. And that is the goal. We're all in this kind of space of, when we talk about the student athlete experience, which is what every athletic department is about helping individuals become what they are meant to become. We focus on the staffs that are there to help the student athletes. We really have to focus on that level. I don't think that any coach or leader can help others if they're not intentionally focused on making themselves the best that they can be. So yes, we certainly do that. We do it actually all the time.
All right. So I keep saying last question. We're on the way out now. This is lighthearted. Best Kansas City barbecue.
Oh my God. This is so great. I get this question all the time. I'm not a huge meat eater. I'm just going to get it out there. I do eat barbecue. We are literally 100 yards from Jack Stack. So that's the place I go to the most. But in Kansas City, it used to be called Oklahoma Joe's, and now it's Kansas City Joe's. It's in a
gas station.
Yeah, it's in a gas station. I was going to say garage, but so there's something about the energy of Oklahoma or Kansas City Joe's. Q39 is gaining a lot of traction here. So obviously I did not come up with the best barbecue, but I can tell you Kansas City has the best barbecue of any of these other cities out there. So you kind of can't go wrong, Gates, but where we are in the crossroads, Jack Stack is the closest, and you cannot go wrong.
Well, you can probably tell from my my form and figure. I eat a barbecue, and all of those that you mentioned, I've eaten at, and they're great.
They're the best. It's all good stuff. It's awesome.
Yeah. Patti, thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join me, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, appreciate it, Mike. Thanks for what you're doing.
All right. So you can hear Patti on the Women Leaders podcast, and you can follow her on Twitter at Patti Phillips 10. If you need more information about Women Leaders, we know that you can find what you need on the internet, but I know that she and her staff will be glad to talk to you one-on-one as well, serving in a tremendous role for our industry. Patti is one of the champions of leaders, period, but certainly of women as they advance in this space that we all love so dearly. I'm Mike Hamilton. I'm your host for From the Chair. And I want to thank you for being with us this and every week, and we'll see you next time.